Good morning, 5th and 6th graders. We are getting ready to talk a little bit about history and Germany, which is an interesting country. For me, a few months ago, my brother did some research and found out that our family, the Setzer family, originated or had some originations from the land of Germany. So, I don't know what that says about us, but nevertheless, it's kind of fascinating to find that out. Let's take a look at our map. We've talked about several of these countries in Western Europe. Remember, it's the birthplace of Western civilization. We talked about the British Isles in our last unit. We've talked about Portugal, the home of the cork oak, Spain with the matadors and the tidelands and the explorers. And do you remember the Strait of Gibraltar down to the south? Here's France with its Eiffel Tower, the Huguenots, the followers of John Calvin, Napoleon Bonaparte. And then if you come over, we had Italy. We talked a little bit about Mount Etna, Mount Vesuvius, how they're known for artists and musicians and gondolas. We briefly just mentioned Greece with the capital Athens and the island of Crete down to the south. And today we're going to go ahead and move on up into Germany. And of course, last week we talked just a little bit about Switzerland and Austria as well. So today we're up into Germany. Germany is sometimes called the land of the Reformation. Now, if you remember prior chapters when we studied about Christianity, we talked about how in 1517 a man began the Protestant Reformation by doing something that was so very intentional and so bold, where he nailed on the door of the theses, the 95 Theses on the door of that Roman Catholic Church. Do you remember who that was? The Protestant reformer, Martin Luther. I know some of you are shouting out that answer to your screens. So therefore, because of what he had done in the work of the Protestant Reformation, Germany is sometimes called the land of the Reformation. There's your German flag. Now, Germany for a while was strong in the Christian faith, but then they began to decline and other ideas and views seeped in, and Germany became a weaker country. Around the 1600s, the Catholics and the Protestants began to fight, and ensued the 30 Years' War, which left Germany a very poor and poverty-stricken country. To the east of Germany, you had Prussia. And Prussia came in and kind of took over Germany, and there were men that helped to try to rebuild and make this Prussian or German empire, as you see here. One was a man by the name of Frederick the Great. He was a Prussian king at that time, and he made this an empire, a world empire. And then you had Kaiser Wilhelm I. Now that might jog some of your memories. Wilhelm I and Wilhelm II are going to be crucial in World War I. The word Kaiser means emperor. Now, this gentleman and his grandson had a desire to expand their empire. They were not just happy with Germany or that Prussian region. They wanted more. They wanted to control more. This desire to expand the empire led to World War I. In this war, you had the Allies fighting against the Central Powers. Now, the Allies, I like to say, were the good guys, the Allies. The Central Powers were those that were fighting against him. And you'll see on this map, in orange, that is your Central Power group. And then in yellow, you have your allies over here as well. And then in pink, you have your neutral nations. Let's notice right there, little Switzerland. I mentioned that last week. They like to remain neutral. World War I left Germany torn and broken. They did not win that war. The Central Powers lost. The Allies gained the victory. So afterwards, Germany is a torn nation. Once again, they're broken. They are poverty-stricken. And in the 1930s, you have a man by the name of Adolf Hitler. And he rises to power with his National Socialist Party, or the Nazis. Now, this man was wicked. He thought of himself as a god. He really did. He thought he was superior in power, superior in knowledge. He was the epitome of a humanist. He thought that there were groups that were inferior, groups that were of ethnic minorities, or the Jewish people, and many Jews were murdered during this time period of World War II. And so Hitler is in power. And something about the German people that I noticed as I was studying these chapters, they're very loyal. And a lot of them, maybe out of loyalty, probably out of fear, they followed this leader, this dictator, Adolf Hitler. And maybe they didn't agree with him, but perhaps they didn't know what else to do. This led to World War II. And you had, during this time, the Axis fighting against the Allies. Again, the Allies are the good guys. Think about the word Axis. There's an X in it. We want to X them out. This is Hitler, and he would have, this is Stalin down here. He would have been with him for a while, but later on he's going to switch sides. Over here you have Winston Churchill. We've talked about him before. And up here, Roosevelt. And that, of course, was the leader of the United States of America who joined in the war later on. You're going to read a little bit more in detail about World War II. But it was a time, a terrible time for the countries of the world as they fought one another. After World War II was concluded, Germany's city, capital city, Berlin, was divided, a city divided. You had West Berlin that went under the control of the United States and Great Britain and France, and they helped to rebuild that part of Berlin. And then you had East Berlin that fell under the Soviet Union, which is modern-day Russia. Can you imagine? Oh, this is a city that we're talking about, being separated possibly from some of your family. There was a great wall that was built. But in 1989, a conservative president by the name of Ronald Reagan challenged Mikhail Gorbachev, who was the leader of Russia at that time, and he said, Gorbachev, tear down that wall. And millions of Americans and the world watched as they began to hammer that wall. And this wall of shame, as it had been called, was torn down so that Berlin was once whole again. Now, when you think about Germany, you have to think about some famous Germans. Some of them were musicians like Johann Sebastian Bach. He was the father of modern music. And then you had Beethoven. And Beethoven, who in spite of physical difficulty, becoming deaf at an early age, still composed beautiful music. And I've read before that as he got a little older in life, he was leading an orchestra. And of course, he had his back to the crowd. And he was leading this orchestra. And he couldn't hear the instruments, but he could hear it in his head, and he knew the tempo and the rhythm, and he was leading. And as he got done, he stood there on the podium, and behind him the crowd was just thunderously applauding, and he didn't even know it because he couldn't hear it. And someone turned him around and he saw all the applause. So what a great musician this gentleman was. There were others as well from Germany. And then you had scientists like Johann Kepler, who was involved with helping to determine how the planets moved in their orbit. And then, I know Aiden Starnes will recognize this guy, you had Albert Einstein with mathematics and science. So the German people were hardworking. They were known for their intelligence, their respect for authority. And so it's a nation that when you study, we often think, oh, Germany. But remember, from Germany, although there was some good, although there was some bad, there was some good that came as well. So I hope that you enjoy learning a bit more about this country, and we'll see you soon.